if over 30,000 British citizens had been killed, would this same justifications be happening? I bet you not.
Today, we're speaking to Rahma Zein, an Egyptian activist and podcaster who's been using her large following on social media to call for an end of Israel's occupation of Palestine. She also recently gave a speech at the Gaza solidarity protests at UCLA, and she joins us now to speak about it. Rahma Zein, thank you so much for coming on Real Talk.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Rahma, I want to start off just to get your general view of things. What has your experience been with Western media generally?
It's, something, it's actually unhinged. It's absurd.
Unhinged.
If you were going to write a dark comedy, the director would tell you it's too unbelievable, you have to change the script. I'll tell you why. So
Yeah,
I
please.
went to the student movements. You go in, they're sitting there writing emails to the administration. You have the person who took me into the protest was a young white Jewish man, American man. You have people inside. And by the way, that's the whole point of a protest. These people are saying 30,000, killing 30,000 is wrong, but they're from all walks of life. So you have the left, you have the right, and they're all sitting in one encampment. So obviously you're going to have different messages. But the main message is there that, hey, genocide is wrong. We've allowed you over 6 months to do something about it, and you haven't. So it's as if you're standing in a room, there's a fire happening, and you're waiting for the adults to come in, for the ambulance to come in to put it out, and no one is. So it would actually be really scary if these students were not doing something about it. 30,000 people dead later, And then you see the encampment, how peaceful it is, how they're sitting down writing emails. And then it was most interesting in the UCLA one, starting 10 p.m. And I was there when during the music that was used to harass them, and over something thousands of dollars spent on a stage. They have a stage, the other Zionist protest. They're playing torture music because bear in mind, they have ex-IDF soldiers and such. They send them lab mice.
Are these things that you have seen firsthand?
These are things I've seen, and I have footage of all of this. But then I left, and at 10 p.m., apparently they were attacked, and it was so obvious that this attack was happening. And they're like, and they were saying, they're like, we think they're gonna attack us, and we don't know what's gonna happen. And university security that's supposed to be there to stand by you is idle. You have the other encampment, the Zionists, have gotten private security called Apex, who are standing there, helping them remove the barricades that the peaceful protesters had. And I don't even want to call them pro-Palestinian, by the way. Some of them are pro-America. And that's what's funny. Hannah, this is what I mean when I tell you their media is unhinged. So they have these key messages that they always regurgitate when they want to discredit any kind of movement. They call them, they're trying to differentiate them between the students and protesters. So you have a reporter go, the protesters are disturbing the students. The protesters are the students. That's one. Secondly, this one is hilarious. They're impressionable teens who are being puppeteered by foreign entities, either be it Iran or Qatar or however they pronounce them in these ridiculous and they're not. And this is what's shocking the students, because then they're like, you are willing to have all your mainstream media, all your politicians turn on your own people for a foreign entity? Oh, it's not the US that's been dictating the move. It's not the US that's been dictating the movements of Israel. It's been Israel that's been dictating the US after all. And that's what's shocking the patriotic students who actually see that the American dream and the soft power of the US has fallen. And that's the other thing that's most interesting. It's as if we've been steered by US soft power to think that they are the democratic, that they are, the ones that are modernizing. But no, they've been weaponizing democracy. They've been weaponizing the UN. They're a bunch of thieves and murderers who hold press conferences. So you're kind of, and that's what one student pointed out. He's like, you kind of get confused because you're having at one point this person who's holding up these meetings, but he's also the same person who's calling for mass slaughter of the people. So it kind of confuses you. But just as the US even said it, that their PR has fallen, and all they had was PR. The reason we all stood silent about Iraq is why Palestine is happening. You stand silent about Palestine, who knows who's going to be next?
Just on that note, Rahma, the PR note, there was a recent conversation between Mitt Romney and Antony Blinken. And they were basically, they were talking, I think you know what I'm talking about. They were blaming the shift in the narrative on Israel on social media, including TikTok. So for somebody who's like I said, very active on social media, you post news and explainers and whatnot. I mean, what do you make of this?
Exactly that. The reason they did own the narrative for so long, because they owned mainstream media. There wasn't a counter argument that was prevalent. And honestly, we had been silent about what's happening in Palestine for too long. What happened, the massacre in Jenin, for example, should have gotten everybody to stand up and not sit back down. And this is the thing. I always put what he said as an example to the New York Times. In 2014, 4 Palestinian children playing football by the beach were killed by the occupation. The headline diluted the incident in such a manner you wouldn't blink seeing the headline. 4 children found dead by beach, something like that. It doesn't say the perpetrators. It doesn't say that properly that they were children. It doesn't say that they were simply playing football. So you have this distance between, you have the control on mainstream media that was hiding the truth. It was lying. You have mainstream media that was lying. Now you have people on the ground taking footage of IDF soldiers playing with lingerie of dead and displaced Palestinian women, of them torturing Palestinians, of mass graves, over 6 mass graves found, of the language that's being used by the occupation, that usually Western politicians would try and hide because it's too controversial. All of this is out in the open. Guess what? It's not because the people who are telling you what's happening in Palestine are using social media. It's because the occupation is outing itself on social media. They are sharing these videos on Telegram channel. They are tweeting for the annihilation of Palestinians. They are given platforms to speak. So actually, they're the ones uncovering the truth themselves, because it's like a frenzied shark who's just attacking their own and everything around them. And the fact that this is being condoned is not just shocking me, it's shocking everyone. And going back just 7 months later, having to, and that's the thing about Zionism. This is why it's so much easier for these politicians to digest, for the Piers Morgans of the world to digest, because inherent in Zionism, like the identity of Zionism includes the Middle East that was conjured up in Westminster and Fleet Street. That colonialist mentality is intertwined with Zionism, the racism. So instead of just blatantly saying, hey, I'm racist, and then we can have a conversation, by the way, I'd rather you just say what you are, so that we don't have to deal with these confusing double standards, than have to deal with someone attempting to mask their racism.
The reason why I brought up the Blinken chat or conversation was because I think, his comments, they echo a narrative that's being put forth by politicians, by some in the Western media or some in mainstream media, that the opposition to Israel and its actions in Gaza actually stem from an ignorance of history. So when it comes, like they use social media as an example, and then others said, when it comes to these student protests at the universities, it's outside agitators that are influencing them. We had Hillary Clinton just not too long ago come out and say that these students don't understand Middle Eastern history.
She doesn't understand Middle Eastern history. She's a nut job with a knife. These are all a bunch of Muppets who still have a colonialist mindset, and they will not combat it now. The thing is, Israel is their pet project, basically. And if you are going to look at history, Palestinians were never included in the negotiating table, because you have to look at what was happening in the this was a time of colonialism. This was a time of carving up the Middle East between France, between Britain, the fall of the Ottoman Empire, and all of this history has been unveiled. If anything, it is the fact that now people have access to history. Speaking of what you're saying, when we would go to historians in Ivy League universities during this time, they weren't allowed to talk about the history of Palestine because they don't have tenure, so they have a fear of losing their job.
This is you doing it, you're saying it.
Yes, I attempted to contact a specific university professor, and she couldn't speak because she's like, I'm sorry, I don't have tenure. I may lose my job. To speak about the history, even modern history. Let's go to Shireen Abu Akleh and her best friend now, who's Fatin, who's taking the lead in the journalism, continuing from Ramallah. What had happened, her assassination, an American Palestinian, that was sort of swept under the rug. What happened to Shireen Abu Akleh? Now, because of social media, everyone is showing footage of when they were holding her what's it called, when they were moving her body, and then they got attacked by the occupation. More insight on the history of one American activist who got bulldozed by the occupation because she was trying to stop the
Rachel Corrie.
settlements.
Yeah.
Exactly. So what happened with the protests, with the UCLA protests, with the obvious violence towards these students, for example? That was taken as footage and circulated on social media. On mainstream media, zero coverage. If you were to, speaking of this, if you were just to look at mainstream media regarding the students in UCLA and USC, you'd think they were infiltrators, non-American, impressionable teens. This is the three things that they keep reiterating.
Tell me about what you saw, because you were filmed giving a speech there, right? You were at UCLA giving a speech to the protests.
Yeah.
What did you see? What was your experience?
So UCLA, students from all walks of life, extremely organized, keeping it as peaceful as possible. When you talk to the students, they feel betrayed by their politicians. And one of them stated they are this quick to turn on me for a foreign entity. And this made them shocked. One student wasn't even there for Palestine, was there for America. He was like, there is a street in LA filled with homeless people, and all this money is going to an occupation that's slaughtering people. I think I want this money being given to America. Another student was also echoing that and saying he's like, America as a superpower is done because all we had was our PR cover-up, and now that PR cover-up has sort of unveiled decay, literally, and blatant lies. They've lost the plot, and also they've lost the control over the occupation. There were other students sitting down, I'm serious, sitting down writing emails to their administration. This is what we want. Universities should not be should not be a part of a genocide. This is crazy, because here we are sitting in classes, and this is, I'm quoting one student, learning social justice in class, and then not allowed to implement it in real time. And we keep reading about the heroes that were the youth that stood up to Vietnam, and now that we're standing up, you're calling us terrorists. Oh, you're going to celebrate us once you've silenced us. And this is what you see. They celebrate them as heroes. Once you're done, fine, I'll write you in the history books as you did a good thing. Here's throw a dog a bone. So these students were extremely peaceful. On the other side, utter harassment. And then, once their encampment was dispersed extremely violently, this is when I tell you, utter dystopia. You have over 3 helicopters flying over these peaceful students. It's like, where were these helicopters when they were getting ambushed by Zionists?
So you saw the police raids.
I did not see the police raid, but I saw the next day, because the students were protecting me. They're like, I was there to give a speech. They were like, no, we want you to leave. We don't want anything to happen to you because you don't have a passport here, and you know, and they're arresting everyone. They've arrested over 41 students in one night, and you don't know the fate of these students, because it was because at one point they were going to, recently one of them called me because they were going to do a sit-in on one of the buildings. The police got to them first at the parking lot, arrested them on the grounds arrested them unlawfully on grounds of conspiracy. So it's just they are tweaking the laws in order to permit violence towards students. And that is then being enabled by mainstream media that's trying to depict them as some kind of anarchic hooligans, when at the end of the day, these are the students who are stepping in where you've stepped out.
What do you think your biggest takeaway from these protests was?
Hope. You know, these youth are absolutely amazing individuals who are so vested in this, and so smart, and sometimes you even vent what's been happening, and they give you that sort of analysis. And it was one of the protesters who told me the reason we're so confused is because on the one hand they're having these meetings in the United Nations. They're talking about, you know, proper political correctness and the jargon that ought to be used. They are the pinnacle of democracy. But again, all of this was PR. And now that this PR has fallen, you're just standing there going, you've been lying this whole time. And it dawns on you that the PR was so strong, it was covering the fact that the Vietnam, and now it's covering Palestine. And at one point, this cycle has got to stop. And then another student who tells you about the climate change aspect of it, that what they're doing is actually a danger to the climate, and how they're getting these foreign trees to look more like home into Palestine, and that's attacking indigenous trees, how they're burning the trees. So it's as if there is a violation on every single aspect, on human rights, on animal rights, on climate, on with climate change. So there's nothing they're not breaching, and yet you are seeing these institutions who usually made it seem like these were faults of Arabia only, silent. How are these women rights? Where is that? Where are the pioneers of women rights who keep telling us, oh, you're oppressed, you're oppressed, you're oppressed? Here, where's your take on what's happening now? What's your take on women giving birth without anesthesia, in the worst of conditions? What do you have to say about that? What about the women being harassed by these occupation soldiers? Where's the conversation here? You've been very vocal before, because that was also PR. PR was making you think these, not to negate that we don't have our issues, but PR made you think that these were issues of just the region, not international.
You know, one of the figures that's been heavily criticized in these student protests was President Minouche Shafik of Colombia, because obviously she's called the police and invited them and had a police presence in Colombia against the protest. Now, I don't know, were you laughing on screen? Is that what was happening? I don't know. I was just, you disappeared. But as you know, like Shafik,
I don't speak
you know,
English very well.
Yeah.
So
but the reason why I bring her up is because, you know, as you know, she has Egyptian parents. She's of Egyptian ancestry. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about her actions? I'll tell you why I brought her up. I'll tell you why I brought her up, Rahma. You had this quote that I heard in one of your interviews, and you said the problem are the people who look like us, but speak like them. So I just wanted to kind of see if this is something that you were tying together with your time at these protests.
Oh, for sure. At the end of the day, who's gonna get it? And this dawned on me when I was much younger. When I remember we were having a conversation, and this is very informal setting. We're just having a conversation, and I was speaking about something with Egypt, and then one of my supposed friends, who is white, American, whatnot, and she said, "Don't be like them." And I'm like, who's them? And she meant like that I was starting to talk in a way that wasn't whitewashed enough. And then I told them, oh no, if you thought I am them. I'm not just them. I am too much them. And I got up and left. And then but because I live here in the Arab world, we don't really see that we need to assimilate. Everyone's just like, but then you go off and you meet Arabs in the diaspora, and there is sometimes where they have a need, if they want to be in a certain political field, if they want to be in a certain with a certain title or get far ahead in their career, they do need to assimilate in a way. Because of that, you get politicians who end up looking like you because they groom them, because they're the perfect representatives. They're the most, sorry, not the perfect representatives, but rather the most effective representatives. Because then you go, here it's the American Arab, and he's saying 1, 2, 3, just as we're saying. And that's when you see that if they dare go off script, they're going to be kicked out of their position for sure. And that's when you get them groomed. And I'll never forget, I was invited actually by the State Department to cover the Mitt Romney Obama elections. And that's when I was younger, more impressionable and whatnot. And it was really interesting that I found that they invited also other people from developing countries. And you go there, they give you a per diem, they tell you America's great, they also add in, entertainment, they sell you an American. This is PR. And it's a type of visa where you're not allowed to then live in the US for 4 years. So you go back to your country. So you go back to your country with these ideas and the soft power that you were brought in, and then maybe 4 years later they invite you back, and that's when there are grooming institutions, and that's where American tax dollar goes to those kinds of exchange programs, but they're actually like these brainwashing programs. There's that aspect of the people of the region. The other aspect is the ones that are living in the West who do want to get ahead. I want to be in this position. I want to be, the dean of this prestigious university that's Columbia. Am I gonna get there by representing the voice of the people? No, I'm gonna be representing the people with the money. And this is all what it boils down to. We all assume that it was kind of smart tact, but it's not. It's a few people with some money puppeteering a bunch of impressionable politicians.
So we're just going to move on to Rafah now. And the incident that we were speaking about earlier, I think it was October, November, when you were filmed at the Rafah crossing in Egypt. Now, during that time, I think you actually spent the night, you spent overnight there at the crossing with the convoy and whatnot. Did you hear the bombing going on in Gaza? The reason why I'm asking this is basically I want to hear what you went through as someone that was just on the other side of the border. So people can't even imagine what's happening inside Gaza, what it was like for somebody to be so close, but not inside Gaza.
They are evil, They're really evil because they also add on psychological warfare. So you have the Rafah crossing, and then people would get news that they're going to open the crossing to get aid in. So people would call up, try and get to, if there was connection or whatnot, to try and tell people, oh, you're gonna get aid, you're gonna get aid. they would then bomb the crossing, so that even if it was open, you can't enter through the trucks. So they tell you it's gonna be open, and then they bomb the crossing. So this in itself is the most
And
evil
these are
tact
things that happened while you were there.
just the night before, and you see that it's completely broken. And they do this. They wait till you're sleeping. So 2:30 a.m. 2:30 a.m. bombardment. And it's so scary. You get out of your tent and you look, and this is something that's happening just 3 kilometers away. And you're thinking that with each bomb, how many people are dying? With each bomb, how many people are waiting to be next? With each bomb, how many adults are themselves scared, so they're unable to console children who are asking what's happening? It's the waiting to die that is so scary. It's the asking, when is it going to end? And on top of that, the sound of drones, it's just torture. They don't just kill them, they torture them. And just the fact that you are allowing people with that kind of not moral compass, lack of moral compass, to go on and dictate what's next for Palestinians, and for that to then, and this was October, so for that to have happened, and this is when I say to, and this is what I was speaking about, for example, with these students. If they didn't stop it then, what makes you think they're going to stop it now? If they didn't stop it with the first incident of the killing of the family of Hind, and then her, and that and that call of her calling aid workers and telling them, I'm scared. If that one incident didn't stop this whole massacre, what makes you think it's gonna stop at Rafah? It's not. These people have no moral compass. And I am so sure, if this Hind was a British child, if Hind was a British child, if over 30,000 British citizens had been killed, would this same justifications be happening? I bet you not. And that's what's so scary about all of this. The double standards, the racism that is coming to light, that had just been, masked. The 2.0 colonialism that's like here to stay, the facelift that it's gotten.
Do you reflect on your place in all of this? I mean, you have a large following on social media. Do you ever think back and say, what does this mean for you? Do you feel like you have some sort of role, some sort of responsibility?
If you have an Egyptian mother, that role will be diminished very fast, because she definitively humbles me. She's like, I don't understand what you've done, free Palestine, and that sort of statement stays with me very much. But I do believe that this sum of the parts equals the whole. I do my part, he does his part, she
What do
does
you
her
believe
part.
for your part to be?
Exposing the truth, being, I don't, not being the voice for the voiceless, for all of us to be the voice for the voiceless. That's what you were saying with regards to mainstream media. Mainstream media has been owning the narrative for so long. You need to start countering that by having other voices. And that's what I had said in October. Where are our voices? They've made it, we need to start this, and that's the thing. If you dare think that Palestine is outside of you, you are very naive. This has to do with you wherever you are in the world. This is about freedom and justice, and talking against oppression. That's simply saying the slaughter and the disrespect. And I said this before, especially culturally, sometimes you kill me is much better than to disrespect me in this way. And that's what I mean by their psychological warfare. Disrespect Palestinians feel in checkpoints, to treat a father in front of a child the way they do, a mother in front of her son this way. It's embarrassing that this has been allowed to go on for so long. And I feel guilt.
What kind of guilt do you feel?
I definitely, for not having spoken. We went about our daily life. Janine happened, And then we spoke up for a while, and then we continued. At one point, you do feel guilty that this was something at the back of your mind and you didn't speak about it as you ought to have. And this is another thing. And that's what I talk about the students. It's like you're waiting for someone else to fix it. And at some point, you realize the United Nations is a facade, and because it's a facade, it's being weaponized. All the conferences that you keep hearing about, it's PR. And this PR has fallen, and now you've realized that we as a collective need to step in and do something about it if you do want the sustainable world we keep speaking about. If you want something effectively to stop climate change, if you want the resources to stop being robbed, if you want incidents like Sudan to not happen again, if you want Congo to not happen again and again, then you need leaders who are ethical, who are not so easily bought, who realize that there's more important things than worldly surroundings. Have your fun, enjoy being a politician, but also do your part. And that's the thing. And that's what I was thinking. What's the point of continuing in this life when you're seeing and you're getting and you're making it normal, and you're normalizing seeing slaughter for over 200 days and so much bloodshed? It's insane. It's insane. And what's more insane is not the slaughter. What's more, you expect this from the occupation. That's what they've been doing. That's what they do. The mental warfare, the slaughter, the genocide, that's what they do. They don't want Palestine because Palestinian existence is Palestinian resistance. Their mere existence is resistance. So that you expected from. What you are so shocked about are those that are standing watching, or those that are condoning, or those that are cheering this on. Shocking. Shocking.
Rahma, thank you so much for coming on. I truly appreciate you taking the time to speak to us.
Thank you very much.